I thought the hardest part of planning my wedding would be choosing the dress or the venue, but nothing prepared me for the moment my own mother looked at me with cold certainty and refused to help, because in that instant I realized this wasn't about money at all. It was about power, control, and choosing who mattered. My name is Rachel Whitman, and when Ethan asked me to marry him while standing in our tiny kitchen with a nervous smile and shaking hands, I truly believed that this engagement would finally change the way my mother looked at me, because I thought a wedding would force her to see me as worthy, grown, and deserving of support rather than constant correction. She'll be happy, I told Ethan that night, holding the ring up to the light. She has to be. He hesitated before saying, I hope so. A week later, I sat across from my mother Linda at her dining table, listening to the clock tick while my palms sweated, because silence had always been her favorite way of reminding me who held power. So she said finally, You're getting married? Yes, I replied carefully. We're planning something simple, but I wanted to talk to you about the wedding. She lifted her eyebrows. About money, about support, I said quickly. Not luxury, not anything big, just help if you're willing. She set her cup down with deliberate slowness. I'm not paying for this. The words felt sharp even though her voice stayed calm. I'm not asking for everything, I said, leaning forward. I just hoped you'd want to be part of it. She shook her head. You made your choices, Rachel. I chose love, I replied. I chose a future. You chose independence, she said. And independence comes with consequences. My chest tightened. Why does everything I want feel like a punishment to you? She sighed. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest, I said. You helped Olivia. Her mouth tightened. Your sister listened to advice. I listen, I said. I just don't obey. That's the difference, she replied. I swallowed hard. So this isn't about money, it's about responsibility, she said. I won't reward stubbornness. I laughed quietly, not because it was funny, but because it hurt too much to stay silent. Getting married isn't rebellion, she waved her hand. Love doesn't pay for venues. Neither does control, I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes hardened. Watch how you speak to me. I took a breath. Why can't you ever just be happy for me? She stood up. I am happy. I'm just not contributing. You didn't even ask about the wedding, I said. You'll manage, she replied. You always do. That's because I don't have a choice, I said softly. She turned away. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I didn't, I said. You did, as I grabbed my purse. She added, Olivia's anniversary. Dinner is next week. Don't bring this up. I turned back. You already did, she frowned. You're difficult. I'm tired, I said. There's a difference. I walked out before she could answer, my hands shaking as I unlocked my car, feeling that familiar mix of shame and anger that always followed our conversations. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and whispered, Why does it always hurt this much? My phone rang. How did it go? Ethan asked. She said no, I replied. And she made sure I understood why. What did she say? He asked gently. That independence has consequences, I said. That love comes with conditions. He was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. I thought this would be different, I admitted. I thought this time she'd choose me. She doesn't define your worth, he said. I know, I replied, wiping my face. But it still feels like rejection. I'm choosing you, he said firmly. I started the engine. Something broke today. What do you mean? He asked. I realized she never planned to support me unless I stayed small, I said slowly. This was never about the wedding. And now? He asked. Now, I said, gripping the wheel as I pulled away. I stopped waiting for her permission. I hung up and drove home, replaying every word she said, every look she gave me, and every moment I had shrunk myself to keep peace, realizing through the ache in my chest that this refusal was not the end of my story, but the painful beginning of learning how to stand without her approval. I didn't tell anyone what happened at my mother's table, yet by the next morning my phone was already buzzing, and I understood immediately that silence had never protected me, it had only delayed the moment when everyone felt entitled to an opinion about my life. Rachel, my Aunt Karen said when I answered, her voice already loaded with judgment. Your mother says you really put her on the spot. I asked for support, I replied carefully. I didn't demand anything. Karen sighed. That's not how it sounded. How did it sound? I asked. Like expectation, she said. Weddings aren't something parents owe. I never said they were, I replied. I thought family meant involvement. Family also means understanding limits. She said, your tone upset her. My tone was hopeful. I said quietly, well, Karen replied, hope can come across as pressure. I hung up before my throat tightened enough to betray me. A few minutes later, my brother Mark called, laughing before I even said hello. So I hear you caused some drama. He said, I didn't cause anything. I replied, I asked a question. You always do this. He said, you take things too seriously. I cried. I said, that doesn't mean drama. Mom says you made her feel guilty. He replied, I felt rejected. I said, does that matter? He paused briefly, then said, you'll get over it. That's not comfort. I replied, it's realism. He said, you're strong. I shouldn't have to be. I said. He laughed again. You're reading too much into it. I ended the call shaking, staring at my hands as if they belonged to someone else. Later that afternoon, my grandmother Rose called, her voice soft in the way that always asked me to bend first. Sweetheart, she said, your mother is very hurt. I know, I replied. She feels disrespected. Rose continued. You should apologize and smooth things over for wanting help. I asked, for creating tension. She said gently, peace matters more than pride. I leaned against the counter. Why does peace always cost me? That's not fair. She replied, it's true. I said, I'm always the one swallowing things. She hesitated. Sometimes that's love. Sometimes it's erasure. I said. The call ended quietly, without resolution. At my dress fitting later that week, the consultant smiled brightly and said, who's coming to see you walk down the aisle? I hesitated. I'm not sure yet. My phone buzzed. Karen again? Are you sure this wedding is wise without your mother's support? She texted. I stared at the screen, feeling heat rise in my chest. At the venue tour, Mark joked loudly, guess this is the budget version. I said nothing, smiling tightly while shame crept in uninvited. That night, alone in the bathroom, I sat on the floor and cried until my stomach cramped, because every conversation replayed itself until I couldn't tell where their voices ended. And my doubts began. Maybe I am selfish, I whispered to my reflection. Ethan knelt beside me. You're not, they all think I am. I replied. Maybe I asked for too much. You asked for respect. He said, they asked you to disappear. I almost canceled everything today. I admitted. I felt embarrassed for wanting this. He took my hands. Love doesn't require permission. Why does it feel like I'm on trial? I asked. Because you stopped playing your role. He replied. What role? I asked. The one who keeps everyone comfortable at your expense. He said. I wiped my face slowly. I don't want to do that anymore. You don't have to, he said. The next day, messages arrived explaining expectations, offering advice I didn't ask for, and reminding me to be grateful. None of them asked how I felt. At the florist, when asked about my mother's involvement, I said minimal. The word felt heavy but honest. That evening, I wrote in my journal, love should never feel like humiliation. The sentence stayed with me. I realized something painful and freeing, which was that my silence had protected everyone else from accountability. And the moment I spoke, they chose comfort over fairness. I see it now. I whispered. The family didn't suddenly turn against me. They had always leaned that way. I had just finally stopped compensating. I closed the journal and took a deep breath, feeling a quiet distance grow between me and the voices that had always measured my worth. Understanding that this separation wasn't cruelty, but survival. That distance felt unfamiliar. That distance felt necessary. And for the first time, I didn't rush to close it. I didn't announce my decision to anyone, because something inside me finally understood that every explanation I offered only invited more judgment, more control, and more opportunities for my choices to be dismantled by people who benefited from my hesitation. I booked the venue. I told Ethan one evening while sitting on the couch, my voice steady in a way that surprised me, and I didn't ask for approval. He studied my face. How does that feel? Scary, I admitted, but also quiet. That quiet sounds important. He said. The next morning, my mother called. I heard you made deposits, she said without greeting. Is that true? Yes, I replied. With what money? She demanded. Our money, I said calmly. The money we planned for. She exhaled sharply. You shouldn't be making decisions like this. I should, I said. It's my wedding. Her voice tightened. You're shutting me out. I'm setting boundaries, I replied. That's disrespectful, she said. After all I've done for you, I paused. You've done things for Mark and Olivia too. That's different, she replied quickly. Why? I asked. They needed help, she said. So did I. I answered. Her confidence wavered. You're being difficult, I'm being clear, I said. She scoffed. You think planning without me will work? It already is, I replied. An hour later, she appeared at my apartment door, arms crossed, eyes sharp. You're making people uncomfortable, she said. I'm comfortable, I replied. She glanced around. You can't afford this. We budgeted, I said. Her mouth tightened. You always find help somewhere. Yes, I said, just not from you. She stared at me. I paid for Mark's apartment. I know, I said. And Olivia's honeymoon, she added. I know, I repeated. You never needed me the same way, she insisted. I needed you emotionally, I replied. She waved her hand dismissively. That's not measurable. It mattered, I said. Her voice rose. You're rewriting history. No, I replied evenly. I'm finally reading it. She fell silent, unsettled by my lack of reaction. You've changed, she said. Double quotes. Yes, I answered. Because I had to. She softened her tone. If you slow down, we can talk. I'm open to talking. I said. I'm not open to control. She shook her head. You're being unreasonable. I'm being honest, I replied. That night, my Aunt Karen called. Your mother is worried, she said. She feels excluded. I'm not excluding her, I said. I'm protecting myself. Families compromise. Karen insisted. I compromised my entire childhood, I replied. Mark texted next. Mom says you're acting superior. I'm acting grounded, I typed back. He replied. You'll regret pushing her away. I stared at the screen and responded slowly. I regret shrinking. I stopped replying after that. At the wedding planner's office, Sophie smiled warmly. What matters most to you? She asked. Peace, I said without hesitation. That makes everything easier, she replied. Later that evening, my mother called again, her voice shaking now. You can't do this without me, she said. I can, I replied. She sounded panicked. People will think I failed. I paused. This was never about me, was it? She didn't answer. I'm not responsible for your image, I continued. She whispered. You're hurting me. I've been hurting quietly for years, I said. There was a long silence. You've made your point, she said finally. I'm not making a point, I replied. I'm making a life. She hung up. I sat on the couch, my hands still. My breathing slowed. Ethan sat beside me. You didn't shake, I noticed, I said. How does it feel? He asked. Like standing straight after bending for too long, I replied. Messages came in later accusing me of being cold, selfish, ungrateful, and unrecognizable. Yet none of the words lodged themselves inside me the way they once had. I read them without responding. Silence felt unfamiliar. Silence felt strong. I realized then that fear had always been my family's favorite tool. And the moment I stopped reacting, they lost access to me. I'm not afraid anymore, I whispered. Ethan squeezed my hand. I see that. For the first time, I wasn't bracing for impact or rehearsing apologies in my head, because I finally understood that power didn't come from being understood by people committed to misunderstanding me, but from standing firm without explanation. And in that stillness, I felt something shift permanently, as fear loosened its grip and self-respect quietly took its place. I didn't expect the final confrontation to feel so calm, because when my mother called the night before the rehearsal and asked if we could talk privately, her voice carried the same careful control she had always used when she wanted to reclaim authority over my choices. I need to be involved tomorrow, she said. People expect it. I want you there, I replied evenly, but not in charge. She inhaled sharply. I'm your mother, I know, I said. That doesn't mean you decide my life. Her voice wavered. After everything I've done for you, I'm not arguing the past, I said. I'm setting boundaries now. She began to cry. You're pushing me out. I'm inviting you as a guest, I replied. Not a supervisor. She raised her voice. This is cruel. I'm calm, I said. That's new for us. She accused me of being ungrateful, influenced, and selfish, yet I listened without interrupting, because I finally understood that defending myself only kept me trapped in conversations designed to exhaust me. You're choosing Ethan over me, she said. I'm choosing myself, I replied. Silence followed. If you don't let me walk you down the aisle, she said quietly, people will talk. They always do, I answered. She whispered. You're embarrassing me, I'm done carrying that, I said. She ended the call without goodbye. The next morning, my phone stayed silent. Are you okay? Ethan asked while adjusting his jacket. I am, I said, surprised by how true it felt. At the venue, my Aunt Karen approached me. Your mother is very upset, I understand, I replied. She feels erased, Karen added. I feel present, I said. Mark muttered nearby, this didn't have to be this hard. It isn't, I replied. It's just unfamiliar. As the music began, my heart raced. Yet it wasn't fear guiding me anymore. It was clarity. Because as I stepped forward surrounded by friends who showed up without conditions, I felt lighter than I ever had before. Hannah squeezed my hand. You look peaceful. I am, I said. Walking down the aisle alone didn't feel like loss, because it felt like honesty. And for the first time I wasn't shrinking to make someone else comfortable. After the ceremony, my mother stood across the room, her smile tight, her hands empty. She approached slowly. I hope you're happy. I am, I said gently. She searched my face. You really did this without me. I did it with love, I replied. She nodded stiffly. People noticed. I'm sure they did, I said. She hesitated. I don't recognize you. I finally recognized myself, I answered. She walked away. In the weeks that followed, the consequences unfolded quietly, because control doesn't survive distance. And without access to my life, my mother's influence faded into unanswered messages and strained silences. Mark stopped calling when I refused to manage his conflicts. Karen stopped advising when I stopped listening. Family gatherings grew smaller. At therapy, I said, I don't feel guilty anymore. My therapist smiled. That's growth. One evening, Ethan asked, do you miss her? I miss the version of her I hoped for, I said. Not the reality. We built routines grounded in respect rather than obligation, and every day felt steadier than the last. Months later, my mother sent a message. I hope you're well. I am, I replied. Nothing followed. I realized then that karma doesn't always arrive loudly, because sometimes it shows up as absence, leaving people alone with the weight of their own choices. Standing in our kitchen, one evening, I caught my reflection in the window and said softly, you didn't fail. I remembered every moment I apologized just to survive, every silence I mistook for peace, and every time I convinced myself that love required sacrifice. Without dignity, this was never about money, I whispered. It was about worth. Ethan wrapped his arms around me. You chose yourself. Yes, I said. Without guilt. My wedding day wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And honesty gave me something approval never had. Peace. I walked forward, without her approval, but I didn't walk alone, because I carried clarity, strength, and self-respect with every step. I walked into marriage, I walked into myself, and I never looked back again.